Good morning and welcome to another edition of Inside Jacksonville and the First Coast. Our guest on Inside Jacksonville, a gentleman I had the pleasure of meeting actually last year, although I know who he has been for a long time, Wayne Hogan of Terrell Hogan, attorneys primarily, I think, dealing with accident concerns. Is that right, Wayne?
Yes, personal injury and wrongful death, jury trial work is what we do.
Yeah. Wayne is an avid FSU fan, so I think I can say that, can't I?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that going to get you in trouble with the Gator fans here?
Although we have plenty of Gators in our law firm, they outnumber me, in fact.
I'll bet they do. Wayne had approached us, and one of his representatives had, about a project that I guess you have been doing for a long time, but it seems to have come more to the forefront in the last maybe, 2-3 years in relation to distracted driving?
It has. The genesis of our involvement directly in this is that a group of lawyers in other states and then in Florida, beginning with the death of a college student who was the daughter of one of the lawyers in Philadelphia. She was crossing a pedestrian crosswalk. A person was texting on the telephone and ran her down and killed her. She was a journalism student, as it happened. And so that began a process of taking the message to students, because this was two young people involved in that accident. And so over the past period of time, but specifically last spring, we went into the schools here in Jacksonville to talk to students about the hazards of distracted driving, and then more specifically focused on the use of these smartphones, cell phones, and whether it's hands-free or the using the device itself to make a phone call, or now, of course, texting and Twittering and the like.
Texting, Twittering, and it scares me. Somebody's going to put a Facebook computer up on the top of their dashboard,
or the GPS device, and changing it. Now, some of them are geared in such a way that you can't change them, and that's a good idea. But some you can change, or you can change it if you're using it on your cell phone, for example. All of those things involve distractions to the main task that a driver is supposed to be doing, and that is driving the car, being aware of what's in front of them, so that they can react in case there's an emergency.
It was pointed out to me here that there are 3 types of distracted driving. What are those?
Well, they're manual. If you think about it, having your hands on the wheel, as distinguished from not having your hand on the wheel because you've got a hand either manipulating a device or holding it to your ear. Right. There's visual, because if you glance down to see who's calling you, to try to dial in a phone number, or to change a device, for example, a GPS, your eyes, visual, are taken off the roadway in front of you, and that's distraction. The other thing is your cognitive, or what your brain is focusing on. Right. You can be going down the roadway, and there are examples of this where people, and they've done plenty of studies around the country that demonstrate that when a person is listening, not just to the radio, say, you can listen to the radio, but it's not as though the person on the other end of the radio is expecting you to react, or to answer their question. It's information, but the studies demonstrate that when you are trying to concentrate on hearing a sentence that is being said by another person, your field of vision is actually reduced to a sliver of what it otherwise is.
Just by listening? In other words, trying to decipher, or so you're thinking of a response. As you're thinking of the response, you're distracted, even though your eyes are on the road.
Just think of it. A salesman is on the road, and it is their employer or their manager who is on the other end of the telephone, telling them where they need to be and at a particular time because a call has come in and they need to go to such and such a place. Well, that person in the car has to be concentrating on what is being said by the manager at the place of employment. So when that happens, the field of vision, the ability to react, the seeing of a sign as you pass by that alerts you to a hazard that's up ahead. I have looked at materials that have come from the National Safety Council. And an example that they give is of a tour bus driver who was moving along the highway, missed, because he was on the phone, missed seeing a set of signs that indicated that the right lane would not accommodate the height of his vehicle. The left lane would. So he stayed in the right lane, missed that, crashed, and then terrible injuries resulted from that event. So even though he was looking forward, managing to drive the bus, he was failing to see what he needed to see to drive it safely. Just as an example. That's
interesting. I never thought of it as listening and trying to decide impacts the vision. Now, let me go to a personal thing now.
Sure.
Because I think everybody has had this. In one of the two vehicles that we have in our household, we have the hands-free phone.
Yes.
And when the call comes in, obviously on the steering wheel, now maybe this particular vehicle that my wife has is not totally up to date, but you can answer it with punching on the steering wheel.
Yes.
And you can also turn off. But if you are going to dial, in this particular vehicle, it has on the screen, the listings and who you want to get, and you can go and then you just touch that screen. Well, if I'm looking at that screen, touching that screen, even though it's hands-free, theoretically, I'm talking hands-free. If I'm touching that screen, I'm distracted.
Yes. And for that split second, or more than a split second, ordinarily, because you've got to look at that and make some decisions as to which one is the right one. So you're distracted visually from that standpoint. And this is going to then if something happened right in front of you, you're not going to be in a position to handle what the problem is.
Hit the brakes as quickly as you normally should.
Hands-free, as you can think of it, the manual part to a degree might be helped compared to trying to hold a phone to your ear the way that some people are. But the visual part is changed because you've paid attention to the screen instead of to the roadway ahead of you. And certainly you're having to make some decisions about that. So your brain function is changed as well and is distracted. Just to divert a bit to the business of texting, to take that to the next level, but it is so common among young people, and it's going to be common and is common among the younger people who get into the employment pool, the workforce here.
Right.
If you look down, the average time to produce and type a text takes about 4 to 5 seconds. And at 55 miles an hour, you've gone the length of a football field.
Right.
Without any real attention to
basically,
what's going on.
For all
ahead
intents
of you.
and purposes,
Of
driving
course.
blind.
Of course. And that's why this distracted driving is viewed, and the studies show that it is about 4 times more likely that an accident will occur. It's about the same as drunk driving when you're using a cell phone. If a person, though, is texting, it goes as high as 23 times more likely that there's going to be an accident. And out there in the world today, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, has declared distracted driving as a workplace hazard. Employers are subject to getting fined if they create a workplace in which their employees would be expected to, or the circumstances are such that it's likely that they would be texting while in the operation of a vehicle. Not only fined, but employers are subject to liability in a variety on a variety of bases. One, if it's the employer's vehicle. 2, if it's a cell phone that the employer has provided for the use. But 3, if the employee is in the course and scope of their employment, even if it is the employee's own cell phone, a salesman on the road.
Well, our radio salespeople here at the Renda Broadcasting.
If they're on the road, using a cell phone for the employer's call, then the law would likely view that as there being in the course and scope of the employment with the employer. A death or a serious accident happens, or any accident happens, then the employer, through their insurance, or if they don't have insurance, they themselves are then liable civilly for the damages done, for the death or for the personal injuries.
No, I do know, and that brings up a point. I do know when I've called our salespeople, because I'm production manager here as well as doing these interviews, which I always enjoy. For our 4 radio station, I call salespeople, and I have had one of our salespeople. Now, some of them I don't know whether they're driving or not. I just know they're not in the office. But one of them she has said to me, "Wait a minute, let me pull off to the side of the road," which is great. Of course, she's still answering the phone, but pull off to the side of the road. But so going back to what you just said, though, an employer can be liable if they are functioning for a business. Now, what if the salesperson is in their own car with their own phone, but they're still conducting business for the employer?
If they're conducting that sales call, and it should be understood that when these are investigated, personal injury or wrongful death occurs, when these things are investigated, a good bit of the guesswork is taken out because there is a record of the fact that they were on the phone or the fact that they were texting. And then you can see, if it's a text, you can see what they were doing, whether they were on the employer's course and scope of the employment with their employer, or you find out who were they calling. And it turns out that was a customer or a prospective customer of the company. Then the company is subject to liability for what was done when the accident was caused by the distracted driving of their employee.
That is amazing. Now, and we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left in this segment. I am going to take it both segments. I almost knew I'd have to here with all this information.
Happy to stay.
Yeah, Florida is one of the states does not. I've been in states where you have the mandatory.
Yes.
I just in vacationing, and of course Florida does not. How many states do not have the mandatory?
38 do, 12 do not, and mandatory is in different gradations. Different states handle it differently and have adopted not all the same rules with respect to what you can and cannot do and be in violation directly. But even in Florida, if you're operating a vehicle and you are distracted and you move over in the lane, or you engage in some other thing that is observed by the officer, or definitely if it causes an accident, then you're still subject to charges for careless driving.
Yeah.
And in some states, and it will happen in Florida, you can bet on it, prosecutors will begin treating this the same way as reckless driving. If a death occurs, you can bet on the idea that there will be a manslaughter charges brought against a driver who is acting recklessly and is provably that way. Texting is a good example. And the accident happens, somebody dies. In Connecticut, I think is the state, a young man fairly recently was sentenced to prison as a result of the death that was caused by his use of texting. While in the vehicle.
A lot of other things I want to talk about in relation to this, and we'll do that on the second half of the show. So, Wayne Hogan, stay with us.
Thank you very much.
Continuing with Wayne Hogan of Terrell Hogan, attorneys with accident and injury, et cetera.
Yes, personal injury and wrongful death. Jury trials.
This project that you jumped on after this situation, where was it, in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
A bunch of attorneys got together after this particular incident. Is this a nationwide project now? I mean, is this with these attorneys there and the attorneys at your firm here in Florida and other firms?
It is. The Casey Feldman Foundation came into existence, and more attorneys who do this kind of work in the personal injury and wrongful death field realize that students those who are going to be out on our roads pretty soon, they need to know about these things. We're all concerned about safety. All of us should be. All of us are out there in cars ourselves. And what's worse than looking in the rearview mirror and seeing somebody coming up on you, and they're over here fiddling with their cell phone or their text.
I've seen that.
That has to alarm, and everybody probably has had that experience. Or just driving here today, as I was stopped at a stoplight, I looked and I saw commercial vehicles going by with the driver with the cell phone to their ear. There has to be some education that goes on both in the workforce as well as in the schools.
Well, and I'll admit, I have done it. I've gotten on the road as maybe there's a roadblock, an accident, or whatever. I've gotten, of course, stopped in that case. But let's use an example where I'm not stopped, that for some reason I need to do something, and I have not pulled over, and I have dialed the house, although in my cell phone all I got to do is click one number, the button, and it goes. And mine's not hands-free in my vehicle. It's an older vehicle, 2007. So I've done it. I just keep going back to the handheld as opposed to the GPS where I have to go to the screen. Or what about the Bluetooth, the thing that's in the ear?
Well, that is a form of hands-free, unless you're trying to dial the thing, and then you have some issues about that. But it does not take away the brain function interruption, the cognitive aspect of it, because unless it is let's just say, a completely useless call, if it's an important call that you're making, it is also a call that you ought to be paying attention to. If it's a call that you ought to be paying attention to, you're not paying attention to your driving.
Exactly.
That's what the studies have demonstrated, and that's what makes it so dangerous.
You were pretty definitive in the first half of the show, near the end of the segment, about saying you feel that Florida eventually will have some semblance of a law. Florida, one of 12 states, I think you said, that does not have that, although that doesn't erase it if you're reckless driving.
Yeah, now we have careless driving or reckless, but we don't have a specific statutory rule that has been adopted.
So with your association with the legislature, I'm sure, and there are a lot of attorneys in the legislature, you feel pretty confident that somewhere down the road this is going to happen?
The likelihood is that this will happen. The bills are filed on a regular basis to try to achieve this. If you think about something, for example, like seatbelts, you go back to the time, I do, and maybe you do, when dashboards were metal and people did not have seat belts and they crashed into them, serious injuries occurred. Then they become padded, and then there were the lap belts, and then seat belts, safety belts, and eventually they became required by law.
And airbags in cars eventually.
Sure. And so those things are there as a result of the experience of having people killed on the roads as a result of the lack of these safety devices. Well, the concept here of saying now we have a device that we use and we think is helping us be efficient, and we can multitask and all that, but the place to use it is not the car. Because of the damage in life that it can cause. Just think of how you feel. Put aside the other side of the equation. How do you feel yourself if your careless driving as a result of being inattentive has killed somebody?
I know the answer to this question. So, and that is, what happens if a phone call comes in and you're the only person in the car? Now, when I was on vacation a couple of years ago, my wife was in the car. She answered the phone. And we were in a state that was that you had to have hands free,
and which is a very important point. One thing is if there are two people in the car or more than that, then somebody else gets deputized. We call it Somebody is deputized to handle any calling that needs to be done.
Designated answerer.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I know the answer to this. Let it go to voicemail. Pull off, and then see who called you.
Yes. That's right. And studies have been done. Employers might be concerned, and this is also the National Safety Council has looked in depth at this. Studies have been done on the question of whether productivity goes down within companies that have adopted policies that say no use of these devices in the car. The finding is that it does not reduce productivity because it causes people then to plan their day, to plan their activities. We've just drifted into this situation with mobile devices.
Yeah.
Instead, now we need to be more conscious of that, and productivity in these companies will not go down. It will still be there as long as they plan for how to get their work done.
Well, and couldn't you say in the other case to Mr. Employer, and employers are going to have to train employees, but couldn't you say to Mr. Employer, tell your person if they get a call, they let it go to voicemail, they pull off the side, when you call that, say, client back, excuse me for not answering, I was driving, I wanted to pull off before I called you back so I could give you my full attention, which probably would make the client feel a lot better, which might even be better.
They could, and they certainly can do that. And it has occurred to me that you can, if you're doing that, and it takes really a split second before you're leaving the office, you can actually create the little message that says, I'm driving.
Sure you can. That's right.
I'm going to be driving for the next 20 minutes. If your call comes in, I won't be able to take it. But I'll call you as soon as I have the opportunity to safely do it.
Yeah.
One of the things we're hoping to do is to make available to employers and the workforce here in this area, this listening area, a 1-hour opportunity to hear a presentation about all of these topics that you and I have been talking about, the facts as to how dangerous distracted driving is, what the legal implications are of having employees in the workforce who don't have regulations to follow, putting a policy in place, and then how to enforce the policy, because in the long run, the goal is safety for the driving public, but also employers certainly need to look at their risk-benefit assessment, and they don't want to be on the hook, so to speak, for significant liability caused as a result of the inattention of their
which even if there's not a law, they possibly could be.
Oh, yes, there's no question about that, including some courts in Florida, specific cases have, based on the showing that was made, have allowed complaints or lawsuits to be amended to claim punitive damages above the insurance company of the employer, punitive damages for the company's failure to control the activities of their employees.
You brought something up just a minute or two ago, and I was going to ask you if there was something in the works that where you somehow they could receive plans, explanations, education, or whatever. And you brought it up. You said we are preparing presentations, or you're ready to go out and
we are
present.
Ready to do that.
You're ready to go out. So your firm, and I'm assuming other attorney organizations around the country, have these plans in place. So how do they get in touch with you or whomever to get these presentations to their company, to their church, or to wherever?
Well, it's as simple as checking with me, calling me, or going on our website under my name, Wayne Hogan, and they can do that because we've been in the schools. We know that it has been effective for those students. We've introduced them to something they had not really thought about before, and we hope that they are safer drivers. We want to expand that to the workforce.
I was going to ask, what's the reaction been of the students? I mean, when you go in, you talk to them, you get in an auditorium, and you talk to 100, 500 maybe students in an assembly. And
they all have stories. They all have stories that they can tell about an instance where the driver of the car that they were in was on the cell phone and was distracted. They know of these kinds of situations, but we try to make it very real to them and point out to them the facts that it's like driving blind if you're texting. And we have to be graphic about it. And we have
it's the only way to get them across.
We have videotape interviews with those family members who have been in, including in one of these instances, the young lady called or texted her sister. Her sister was in a car. The sister was texting back the word "yeah," and that's the instant when the accident happened. So texting her sister, and then her sister was trying to text back and died as a result of having received that.
There's one other question that's in here, some of the material that I got I thought was a very good question. We have designated drivers with the alcohol situation, and it's getting better and better and better at that. What if you are in a car and the driver is texting? How do you handle that? I mean, obviously you're going to have some hard heads that say, leave me alone, I'm going to do what I want to do. But if you are a passenger, what do you say?
Well, you have to say something about it. If you care about your own safety, you're going to say, look, let me take that. I'll text it to whoever you want to, or I'll call them if you want. Right. But please don't do that while you're driving this car. Right. Because you're not watching the road. People have to be willing to step up. We know that as time has gone and more information and regulation has gotten out there about drunk driving, that more and more people are willing to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going another inch with you. Yeah. I'll get out of this car unless something changes. I'll drive. You sit in the passenger seat. I'll be your designated driver. Yeah. Well, in some other way, you can simply be deputized, and if an important call has to be made, then the passenger can make it, not the driver. Yeah.
I saw this story this morning. We're recording this interview on the 23rd of January, and this story just came in right before I got off the air. I do some air work with one of our 4 radio stations. I'm going to read this to you. Many new mothers are driving unsafely with their babies in the car. A survey from the child protection advocacy group Safe Kids Worldwide and American Baby Magazine shows moms talk on the phone, text, or check email while behind the wheel. Even though their behavior doesn't reflect it, 63% say they are more cautious while driving since having a baby. 63 say they're more cautious. And yet this report says that's not the case.
and it doesn't occur to them. It doesn't occur to them that they are being careless and putting their baby's life at risk. Yeah. And yet that's why education is so important, whether it's to students or civic groups, which would include groups that have young mothers and others, so that they can see these statistics and realize that if they're texting, up to 23 times more likely to have an accident. 23 times. That's amazing. And if it's at speed, then there's terrible tragedies. I mean, it might be a fender bender, but the likelihood is that if you're moving down that highway, talking on that cell phone, or certainly texting, and we have a slogan that says, one text or call can wreck it all.
That's a good point.
And we used to have in Florida license plates that said "Arrive Alive," and so we've combined the two, and we say "Arrive Alive." One text or call can wreck it all.
We've got to wrap it up, and I want you to give the website again. But on that site, aside from people saying, "Hey, can you come out and make a presentation?" Are these various statistics, these answers to some of these questions that I posed to you, are these different statistics available and how this all got started, whatever?
Yes, we've got a full description of that, and a person can Google my name, Wayne Hogan, or they can go to terrellhogan.com, and it's right there for them to look at, make a decision, get in touch with us if they want to.
Click on distracted driving or something like that?
Yes.
Wayne, great information, and I can guarantee you this show probably won more than one time. So.
Well, thank you. We're hoping that companies will adopt policies that will help their employees stay safe and help the driving public stay safe. And in the end, it'll help them in their risk, their own risk assessment as well.
Well, whether it's companies or just the regular individual, it needs to be done.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, thanks to Wayne Hogan. A lot of great information there. And we will repeat this show because this is such a very, very important issue and very much needed. Now, I always end the show with a thought for the week. But this story came to me a couple of days ago, and I thought this is a perfect place to put this at the end of this Inside Jacks. A California mother promoting a smartphone app to help stop teens from texting and driving. Coming up with the app which lets drivers put their phones on pause while alerting callers they are driving. You can visit safetextsender.com for that. And, of course, again, we will, I'm sure, repeat this show somewhere down the road. Thanks again to Wayne Hogan for coming in and giving us all that information. We have recorded the Internal Revenue Service show, and that'll be in the next week or two, an entire half hour with a lot of changes. I'm Jim Byard. Have a great week. We'll talk with you next week on